All right, my good friends, this is Mr. Davis, Unit 4 predictions. So, Unit 4 is it's called the Maritime Empires or the Transoceanic Empires. It's 1450 to 1750. 1450 here is a pretty important note. The Farrar Morrow map was made in like 1453, somewhere in that time frame. That would be a good date for you to look up and know. But the Farrar Morrow map was a map that showed what basically what Afro-Eurasia thought the world looked like, and they didn't know about the Americas. But please do not write that Christopher Columbus discovered that the ocean that the world was round, because he did not do that. Sailors for a long time discovered that. But what they didn't know was the Americas existed, and Christopher Columbus, knowing that the world is round, thought that he could quickly get to the Spice Islands in India, but he runs into the Americas, and that's why you get the term the Indians, okay, over in America. Well, Portugal was the first country that really wanted to fund the age of exploration in their country for several different reasons. One, Portugal is Christian, and the way that they would get goods from Asia, India and Asia, and like India and China, is they would be land-based trading, and the goods would have to pass through the Muslim nations, and they didn't want to do that anymore. It took longer. They had to pay taxes on it, and they wanted to just cut the middleman out and go get the goods themselves. So Prince Henry the Navigator, knowing his island or his country's geography, they weren't an island; they were right next to Spain. Then right on the Atlantic Ocean, he starts really developing their sea, and they have the compass, they have the astrolabe, they know how to sail against the wind and with the wind, etc. So he's going to fund sailing. His first famous sailor is Bartholomew Diaz. And what Diaz does is he goes all the way down the coast of Africa. And this is why you see a lot of Portuguese get into the slave trade, because they're going down the western coast of Africa straight across from the Americas. So a lot of Portuguese get involved in the slave trade. Um, Vasco da Gama is after Diaz. He is the very daring guy, excuse me there, that goes into India. And he wins some battles and gains some territory. And they set up what is known as trading post empires. They weren't a huge, gigantic nation. This wasn't like China was Shanghai going out sailing. They were a little tiny nation, so they set up trading post empires. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to get goods, and they wanted to tax people going through their territory. One of the places they wanted to tax and that they ended up controlling for a time being was the Malacca Strait. The Malacca Strait was basically the chokehold between the Indian Ocean and China. So all those goods that would have to come there, it was like Grand Central Station. And the Malacca Strait was very important. And for the time being, the Portuguese controlled that. And that'd be a good battle to figure out. If you just Google the Malacca Strait battle, Portuguese, it'll come up. And now I have Trading Post Empire on there twice. One thing I will say is that the 2019 DBQ was about how Portugal impacted the Indian Ocean Trading Network. So I don't think Portugal will be a main topic on there unless it's something to do with maybe like the slave trade, possibly. Okay, and then also Portugal, they got one piece of the prize over in the Western Hemisphere, and that was Brazil. Okay, so what was Spain doing? Spain has a lot of famous people. Spain has Isabella and Ferdinand. They financed Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492. They were the same Isabella and Ferdinand whose daughter, Catherine of Aragon, married Henry VIII, and who he divorced so that he could find a son. So Christopher Columbus discovers the West Indies. He starts the Columbian Exchange. Huge. It wouldn't surprise me if one of the four DBQs talks about the Columbian Exchange, trade networks, diseases passed back and forth, food that goes from one place to another, animals. This is why I would, if I were you, I would have the picture of the Columbian Exchange somewhere where I can reference, just so I know that the potato was going from the Americas to the Europeans and to the rest of the world. And then I know horses were coming from the rest of the world to the Americas, just so you don't get those facts mixed up. So Columbus wasn't a great governor. He finds the island of Hispaniola, but he's an explorer. He wants to keep going, but so he puts other people in charge of the territory that he discovered, and all hell breaks loose while he's out exploring. Columbus actually gets imprisoned for like revolts that happen in his territories, and he does not die the hero that he is today. But he is definitely celebrated as a hero. And we talked about kind of like the checkered history, the kind of like the yin and yang history, so to speak, of Columbus. But you cannot, um, deny he had one of the biggest impacts on the world of any of. You could make an argument, it could be your thesis, that Christopher Columbus was the most important person in world history. Okay, probably, like I said a lot of times, somebody else would have discovered how important this was, but he was kind of the first to bring it back to Europeans. Although there was talk, like the Vikings came across the North Atlantic into what is Canada and Greenland in the 1000s or the 1100s or so, but they didn't have a huge lasting impact. So what else is Spain doing over here? If you get some, we've written some DBQs on Spain. Spain in the New World is not going to look very good. They're going to be, introducing the Great Dying to the natives. They're forcing the natives to work. They die. They're also forcing their religion on the natives. A lot of times do not want it, and they will go after the people that continue to practice their own religion. They also will be abusive. The Spaniards are coming over with a bunch of men, not many women, and so they take native women as their wives, not recognizing a lot of times who those women are already married to, etc. So if Spain and the New World, you can talk a lot about the Columbian Exchange and all the crazy, great things that came out of that, but they're not going to be. History does not look very favorably on how the Spaniards treated the natives in the New World. They were pretty ruthless, and although I'm a Catholic, you're a Catholic. The way they spread Catholicism is not probably how Jesus Christ would have wanted his message sent. He wouldn't probably want you to spread his message with a sword. Again, the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, the Pope divides the line in the New World straight down the middle between Portugal and Spain. Portugal's big prize is Brazil. Spain gets everything else. What was France, England, and the Dutch doing? They were very much entrepreneurs. French wanted to trade and get beaver fur, which is referred to by some Russians as soft gold. They discovered and claimed Canada, Great Lakes, Mississippi River, by like New Orleans, which is right on the mouth of the Mississippi River. It has a French Quarter and Bourbon Street. The Saints. The Catholic Saints. That's where the New Orleans Saints get their nickname. And the fleur-de-lis is the symbol on the Saints' helmet. England was over here in the 13 colonies, and at first glance, England does not have a very impressive territory over in the Americas. They have just this strip of land on the Atlantic Ocean. But the colonies become very, very successful. They're going to thrive off of the slave trade and by putting African slaves to work on the plantations. England also has territory over in India. They benefit from the Mughal Empire kind of bickering with one another between the Hindus and the Muslims. And so they get involved in the spice trade, and they get the ability to start taxing the Indian people. So that was a pretty pretty big development. A variety of reasons for British exploration: their religious freedom. Britain is a very small island, and America offered territory, whatever you wanted to gobble up. I mean, like, think of Daniel Boone, and he could go and get as much territory and claim it for himself as much as he wanted out in Kentucky, as long as he fought off the Indians. So America was intriguing to a lot of people that were kind of dead end over in England, wanted to get out, wanted a change of pace, new scenery, have some land, have some freedom, etc. So some religious freedom, economic freedom. Also, you get a fresh start. England is still, although they didn't have a caste system, they still like, your last name kind of dictated a lot of times what you would, how high up you could go, or what type of jobs, etc., etc. So if you hear about England, I'm thinking England would be more either industrial revolutions, or the American Revolution, or Age of Imperialism. I don't think you're going to get much about Age of Exploration, but you could get some on, like, their 13 colonies in the French and Indian War. So other things that the British would get involved in is, like I said before, they started gobbling up India. They had what is called the British East India Company, and the British East India Company was a private investment firm that was controlling a lot of territory. The problem is that they had some mutinies over in India, particularly the Sepoy Rebellion, which the British were having these Sepoy soldiers fight for them, but they were greasing their bullet cartridges with pork fat, I believe, and or it was animal or cattle fat, and the Indian troops found out about it and went crazy. And Queen Victoria, after the Sepoy Rebellion, she realizes that she needs to come down and control India, take it out of private investors' hands, and put it pretty much strictly in the government of England's hand. All right, so that is England. Dutch, I won't get into all this stuff, but Dutch gets really big in the Age of Imperialism and gathering up territories like the Congo. The Berlin Conference, if you remember, when they all the white Europeans just carve up Africa like a puzzle piece. Would not surprise me at all if one of you guys saw the Berlin Conference puzzle piece on there. So just wrapping up Unit 4, I would say I could see some about the Spanish, how they affected the New World in the Americas. So that's definitely something that could be on there. And it's usually Spain is kind of is seen in a negative light, important but negative. England, they would be probably focusing on India and America, and that would probably wrap it up. That would be my predictions. Maybe it's a compare and contrast Spain's Age of Exploration motives to England's. So I will do the next two. What is this?